Hey my Zakoga, welcome back. Today I'm going to be showing you my process for turning loops and jams into full songs. So it's January, which means I'm doing the January challenge, which means I have been creating some kind of music every day in January, and most of it has been on the circuit tracks. I'm realizing that camera's not on, you can't see what I'm pointing at. Anyways, I've been using the circuit tracks for most of them, so I've got a bunch of projects that I haven't finished. So in this video, I'm just going to pick one and go through the process of expanding it into a full jam. So I imagine a lot of the tips I show you can be applied to whatever your workflow is, but obviously these are tailored for the circuit tracks because that's what I'm using, and that's what I've developed this workflow for. But hopefully you can take something away from it regardless of what you're using. And if you do take something away from it, I'd appreciate if you like the video and consider subscribing to my channel. If you have any comments, suggestions, feedback, or anything to say about the video, make sure to leave it in the comment section. Other than that, I think we're ready to get started. So let's go. Okay, so the first thing I want to mention is that there are a lot of different approaches to this, but I want to mention one way that you can sort of split them in half. So one way is that the original jam was like a more intense, bigger section, and in the process of expanding it, you'd make a less intense B section and an intro, outro that are smaller and less intense, and then it builds up to what the original jam was. So say you have something like this. You don't really need a more intense version of that. In terms of expanding it, you'd bring it back down and build up to that. Whereas if you had something like this, you'd expand that by sort of building up to a more intense version of it and adding more elements to make a sort of chorus section. So those are the two main ways that I would divide it, sort of. So it's good to know how to do both, and it's important to practice both, I would say. Obviously, which one you have to do depends on what jam you're working with, and that's just going to depend on what you were feeling when you were making the jam in the first place. So I think, yeah, it's this one. This is the one I want to work on today. So if we go into the mixer, you'll see we don't have any scenes. If you don't know what that is, I'll explain it in a moment. But so in the original video, I was just switching between the patterns on the patterns page. But it would be important to make some scenes, and we'll do that later, as well as explaining what that means. So as you can hear, if I just play it. I would put that probably in about the middle in terms of intensity. It's nowhere near the one I mentioned before, but it's also a bit bigger and more intense than the other one I showed you. So I think we could build it up a little bit more to a chorus, but I think this is a pretty good... I keep using the words chorus and verse and stuff, and I'm gonna keep doing that just because that's what I know, but there are about a million different ways to refer to the different sections of a song. I'm just going to use the word chorus to mean like the big, catchy melody section of the song that everyone's going to remember when they hear it, and then a verse to be like a smaller, less intense section that probably has more variations between each verse, and then things like that. So I would say this will probably be a pretty good verse section, and we could build it up to a chorus section, maybe add in a solo or bridge kind of thing, and then sort of fade down to a less intense ending. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing is just not necessarily listen to each part individually. If you're just starting out, that might be a good way to pick out what's adding the intensity. But especially a lot of the, like, I know the way I write drum parts, especially. So I know what's gonna take out intensity most of the time. And also, as you can see, synth 2 is entirely empty. So there's not even any sort of... There's no bass at all here. But it still feels like there's bass because there's a lot of variation in the kick drum. If you watch these lights, the orange ones, you'll see it's switching between 3 different kick sounds. And this one's not that big, but this one especially adds a lot more bass to it. So there's not even any bass here, but it sort of feels like there is a little bit. So what we're going to do is go through it and sort of pick out what's going to take out some intensity, what's going to serve as a good starting point as an intro into the song. So what I would say is normally a kick drum is a pretty foundational element, but if we just take out everything except for it, I don't really want to have that one in the intro. So maybe we could start with something else like a clap. But hopefully you notice the problem with that, which is that there's no clap until like almost the end of the bar. So we don't want to do that. Maybe we could have a hi-hat, but I think that's just a bit boring, to be honest. So what I think we're going to do is we're going to make a new kick drum part just for the intro. Maybe we could have it in another section as well. And it's going to be a less intense version of this. So a good way to sort of get a less intense version would be to... So it's this pattern here. We want to duplicate it. So we hold duplicate, click the one we want to duplicate, and then click the destination. So now if we go in here, and let's take out everything else and just listen to this. This is the one, this is a copy, so we can mess with this and it doesn't matter. What we want to do is change it and make it less intense. So if we hold down a sample, we can see all the instances of it, and that's just going to be here. We want to get rid of that. And also there's 2 bars of this for some reason, but they're exactly the same. Maybe I had a reason for doing that, I'm not sure, but just to be safe, I'll get rid of it in both. So that sounds good, but I kind of feel like there's a gap there. In some scenarios this will be fine and it will add a sort of different variation to it, but I would like to put something there. So I think we're just going to stick with one of these 2 samples and replace this beat here with either one of these. So we'll just try both and see which one we like better. Okay, what if we try the other one? Yeah, I think I like it like that better. So that is going to be our intro sort of kick drum pattern. And then as the kick drum gets bigger, we're also going to introduce more elements. So we can start with this less intense kick drum, and maybe we can start with the clap as well. So that's going to be our intro. So how are we going to implement that? So if you go into the mixer and hold shift, actually, if you go into the mixer, you've got all these blank pads at the bottom. These are your scenes. And what that means is we have this set of patterns here, basically. And instead of, say we want to go to this section, instead of having to press all these pads at once, we can just press one button and go to that scene. So if I hold shift and save a new one, so if I go to just any other one, it's going to default to having all the first patterns. Now, instead of having to try and remember what I had, I think it was like that. Instead of having to do that, I can just press this button and it will be exactly what I wanted. Also, just a note, I'm using all these bottom pads and these are going to stay empty, basically because when I want to change patterns, I want to have one that's like an empty buffer pattern, so that when I want that track to not be doing anything, I just put it on this bottom pattern. What I normally would do is I'd have these 3 be different sections, and then have these will be the empty ones, and then down the bottom is if I need to have extra, and what I usually use that for is a bridge, or in the synth tracks, the synth solo. Anyways, so now we've got our first scene of a less intense section. So how are we going to build that up? Well, firstly, we're going to go back to the other kick track, or the other kick pattern. Just like that. And then maybe we'll bring in the hi-hats. As you can hear, that's got that open hi-hat. Maybe we can bring that in afterwards, but I think for now, we don't have to stick with this, but we're just going to try it. We're going to duplicate this again, go here, and replace this open hi-hat with a close one. So it's still got those sort of flares from this little hi-hat roll here. If we listen to this step here, it's got a little roll, so we still have that sort of flare there, but it's still a bit less intense. And I think at this point, you might be ready to bring in the synth as well. But maybe, as you can see, this knob is filter frequency. You can't really see that. Yeah, filter frequency there. So we can turn that down, and it will have a low pass filter. So it'll be a bit less intense as well. So then we can do that, and so let's save a new scene like that. So this will be the start of our verse, and throughout the course of this verse, we'll go in here and open up that filter to build more intensity, and then we'll jump into a chorus section. And how are we going to do that? Well, firstly, more intense hi-hats. That's pretty easy. We might want to add some kind of percussion element, just like a crash cymbal, like, what is it? Why is there a filter? No, not a filter. Why is there a decay envelope? I'm not sure why that's. So we could add a crash cymbal. We might do that in a bit, but for now, I think we're just gonna first add in some kind of, probably some kind of bass here. I'm not sure, but it's, so far there's not really any variations. So to make a sort of bigger chorus section, we're gonna have to add something, and I think we could do that with so firstly we might make this section more intense somehow, maybe with some effects or something, and then we'll also, sorry, I said this section, I meant this synth track, and then we'll also add in a bass on synth too. So I'm not going to show the process of writing a bass line on camera. I'm planning on making some videos in the very near future on how to write bass lines, how to write melodies, how I write my drum parts, all that kind of stuff. So if you want some tips and tricks on those kind of things, those videos should be out soon. But in the meantime, I'm sure there's a lot of other great content here on YouTube for that kind of stuff, but I'm not gonna record that part of this process, otherwise this video is gonna be very long. So I'm just gonna come back once I've come up with a bass line, and yeah, I'll see you then. Okay, so I've written a bass line. It goes like this. So I'll just play it along with the rest of it. So let's just record that in. Also, you'll see I've already prepared, so I've chained 2 patterns, and I've also got both of them with 2 bars, because that's just how long my bass line is. So I just need to wait and let it play through before I can record. Alright, here we go. Perfect. I think I got it right, but we'll just check to make sure. Yep, that sounds good. So, if we want to make this the chorus section, so as I explained, I think I mentioned it, the original version of this jam didn't have any bass at all, but the bass was coming from the kick drum samples because there was a lot of variation in them, etc. Anyways, now that we actually have the bass, one thing we might want to mention is sidechain. So, if I just make a really extreme example of this, you can hear it's kind of like ducking up and down, but it's like, this is a very exaggerated example. But what it's doing is, so you can't hear the kick track right now. I haven't muted it, but I've turned it all the way down. You can't hear it, but what it's doing is it's following the kick track so that when the bass drum hits the bass the synth bass will turn down. And the reason for that is when you have them both going at once and they're both pretty big sounds, it can cause them to get a bit muddy, and a lot of the time that's not what you want. So you can use this sidechain effect. So I will unmute everything and just see how it sounds, because realistically this is not going to matter except for during the chorus because there's no bass any other time than that. So we'll just work it out and see if it has any effect, really. I think in this case it's fine with that, to be honest. I don't think it really makes too much of a difference. I haven't designed the sound for the bass at all. I literally just used whatever preset it was on. This is my bass preset that I normally use. And for this one, I mean, I did pick a preset when I made it originally, but I want to sort of play with the sound a little bit to make it a bit more intense for the chorus. Also, just a quick reminder, make sure you save all the time. Don't lose your work, that's not good. Anyways, what are we going to do? So I think in order to make the synth 1 more intense, so let's see what these knobs do. So if we, we're on this preset, so if we take out everything else for now, oh, I didn't press play. That's a chorus. To be honest, I think it seems like the filter is going to be the only thing we can use to add intensity to this, and we've already used that before in the intro section, so that's a shame. There's not really much else we can do. A lot of the time I put a distortion on this effects knob, which allows me to sort of bring in the distortion over time to make it more intense. That's a shame, but it's okay. Maybe we can just focus more on the intensity and the bass sound, and that's going to be easier because if we do it this way, then we're going to have to record. Well, like as we record it live for the final version, we're going to have to turn the distortion knob, except there isn't one. But if there was, we'd have to turn it in real time, or we could motion sequence it. But I don't really like the way parameter recording works on the Sega tracks, to be honest. Anyways, we could do that, but I would honestly just record it in as I'm playing it, and that's a bit difficult sometimes if you want to focus on other things as well. So doing it this way, where the bass is only there when we want it to be really big and intense, it means we don't have to do that. We can just design one sound and keep it the same the whole way through. So that's really helpful. So let's just take a look at these knobs and see what they do. So come into the mixer, mute everything except this, and we'll just leave it going as we work it out. So that adds a second oscillator. That changes the pitch of oscillator 2. I think if we use oscillator 2 an octave below and just have it not too loud, we'll turn down the modulation. The modulation is portamento. And if I turn it down a bit, we can hear each note individually. The filters, I think I'll just keep them how they are. And if we turn up the resonance and have a longer filter envelope, we'll be able to hear that sort of acid sound, but it's a slower like decay on the big long notes. You can hear it sort of cutting off slowly, and you can hear that resonant sweep. I think that's a really cool sound we can have. So if we bring everything back in, I would honestly say that's just a fine chorus section for a song like this. It's a pretty chill song anyways. I think that's fine. So we'll just save this as a new scene, And so so far we've got an intro section, and we'll turn down the filter. I mean, the filter's not in this first section, but it will be in the next one. And we want to bring it in slowly. So I think when we listen to them separately, this one sounds perfectly fine as a chorus. Oh, my camera's about to go flat. Anyways, this one sounds perfectly fine as a chorus, but when we transition between them, there's no real sort of build up. So what I want to do, this is not going to be a build up, but it is going to be some kind of solution. We're going to go down here. We're going to chain these 4 patterns. We're going to make all of them be 2 bars long. And then we're going to chain them all. In the first one, we're going to put a crash cymbal, chain these all. Okay, I think that's too long, so I think we're going to clear these 2 and just chain the first 2 like this. And that adds a bit more intensity, especially during the transitions. So we'll put this new chain into the scene, and now if we put these together, not only does it bring in the more intense bass, it also actually adds some intensity by having that crash cymbal, and I think that's a pretty cool chorus section we can have. So what are we going to do now? Well, we've got intro, verse, chorus kind of thing. Obviously, the verse and the chorus have the exact same synth line. A lot of the time you might want to change that. Like I said, I'm planning videos on how to write like melodic lines for your synths. So I'm gonna not do that in this video. I'm not gonna write a new melody, but if you want to, you certainly can write a different version, or it's just something completely different for the verse. In this song, honestly, I think it might just be fine without. I might change my mind later and write a different version. But we'll see. Anyways, so something else you might want to add would be a bridge or a solo or that kind of thing. So that's gonna be sort of I would have an intro, and then have your verse, chorus, and then maybe repeat that verse, chorus, and then you want to add some sort of variation. So you'll have a bridge or like a solo kind of thing where you hear something new. That would be especially useful in this case because the verse and chorus are exactly the same, it's just more intense. So adding in the bridge where it's something new would be very useful to add variation. So I think we will do that in this case. Instead of having a different verse, we'll just add a sort of bridge section. So in order to do that, a lot of the time, since the bridge is only going to happen once, it's not going to be repeated over and over. You might want to have a bit of a longer chain of patterns. So what I would normally do, like I mentioned, is I would use these second page of patterns for a bridge section. Again, I'm not going to write it on camera. I'll write a solo, and I'll come back when I'm done. Not just because I don't want this video to get too long, but also because my camera on the circuit tracks is about to go flat, unfortunately. So I'll go charge that, write a solo, and I'll come back when I'm done. Okay, I'm back. If it seems like I have lost my train of thought a little bit, that's because I've been gone for like 2 hours and I did a bunch of different jams on here and stuff. So I'm a little bit, I've sort of forgotten where we were up to a little bit. Anyways, so I wrote this bridge solo sort of section. I kind of just spent a little while improvising and came up with a few sections I like, and then I just sort of played it in live, and like I just made sure I included all the things I liked, and then other than that I just sort of improvised in between. Anyways, I put it in a scene already, so I've used these 4 patterns here for the solo. For the solo, like the synth part of the solo, I've got the same bass. These drums are all the same, and then I've just got the same crash cymbal looping thing here, so it will loop twice throughout the solo. So I'll just show you the whole solo right now. And as you notice there, the last notes here, if I go in here and go to the second bar, it's like this climbing thing. What scale are we in? C, I don't know. But it's this climbing thing, the last two notes, like here, the last two notes, and then the first note in the main looping pattern is that. So it's like, and then on this note it goes back into the thing we're used to. So that's something I do a lot. It's just convenient to sort of climb up just below the root note. And I don't know, just put that at the end of the solo. Conveniently, say I'm not paying attention and I just leave this to loop, I can just leave it again because the first note of the solo is also that root note. So that's good. Anyways, let's talk about a few ways to sort of I don't know, make the solo more interesting. So what I would do is, so I've got these, so this is the less intense hi-hat pattern without the open hi-hat, and this is the more intense one with that open hi-hat here. So if I could alternate between those, but I still feel like it would be better if we start with just no hi-hats at all. So we go here and then into this one. The only problem is you can't, because of the way it works to chain patterns, they have to be in order. So there's a few ways to get around this. We could just split the solo into two separate scenes, have one of them have no hi-hats, have the second one which would be, so have these two patterns with no hi-hats, and then make a new scene which is these two patterns with hi-hats. But I think an easier way to do that is to make it all one scene and just, like, we're not using any of these patterns here, so we can just copy it through. So let's make an empty one and make sure it's on 2 bars, and then we can copy that down to the first 2 slots, and then for the second 2 slots, this one, we can copy this into the third slot and edit it to be 2 bars long and duplicate it into the second bar, so it's the same 2 bars in a row, and then duplicate that pattern down to here, and then we have 4, so to have the first half with no hi-hats, and then the hi-hats will come in. So I'll just demo that whole thing there. So that's going to be our updated version of the solo, so I'll save that back into the scene. And it's fairly simple, but that's just how most of the time that is all I would do for a bridge solo kind of thing. So now we've got these patterns, we've got an intro, we've got a sort of verse, and we would start with it filtered down, and then bring it in, and then we've got this solo we can use. So, a few more things to mention. I haven't used this master filter at all. In terms of filtering, I've just been doing it on the track by track basis, but if you wanted to, if we went into this, you can just sort of do a slow little filter sweep to build up intensity. But I think that's not really going to be what I want in this case. It's certainly an option, but I think in this case, I only want the filter to apply to this, and we've already got another form of intensity building just through the different scenes. So I think we're okay not to use that in this case, but it's good to be just aware that that's an option. That's why it's right there. It's a very accessible feature. You can just go immediate filter sweeps over the whole master output. Another thing to mention is that if you say you want to have a more drastic change in the 2 different sections, say maybe for the solo, you don't want to use the same patch, or you want to have the preset be significantly different, what you can do, and this is something people did a lot more on the original circuit, at least as far as I know. I have not used it at all on this circuit tracks, if I'm honest. I just haven't had to use it at all. But it's definitely a useful feature, and for some people, I can imagine it just makes it a lot easier to make their music. But for me, I just don't think I need it because of the workflow I use. However, if you have multiple projects, you can switch to a different project. So if I just make sure I save this one, I'll just use a quick example. These are just two random jams I'm working on. If I go into one and then go into the next, even if the tempos don't match, it will quantize it. It will like make it start on the bar, and it will change the tempo of this new project that you go to so that they will line up perfectly. So here's just a random example with these two little jams. So yeah, that's just something to be aware of. If you want to have more drastic changes, you can use projects. The only case where that's like the only way to achieve a certain thing would be if you want to use a different preset for a certain section. In any other case, it's possible to do it just with across different patterns. Obviously, you might run out of patterns, and that's the other case. You'd need more than one project, but you can just like if you're really willing to put in the effort to record a bunch of knob motions to change the sound over time and all that, then you can. But if that's something you want to do, I'd recommend just changing the projects. And I mean, if you see this as a problem, then to be honest, the circuit tracks probably isn't for you. But you do have to switch it in real time. Like you could theoretically just chain 16 scenes and have a full track and just let it play itself. But if the idea of changing patterns live as you record it doesn't sound appealing to you, then I don't think this is the device for you. Anyways, the one more thing I want to mention, I kind of mentioned this. I've kind of been doing it, but sometimes it's not really a groundbreaking revelation. It's just the fact that sometimes you're going to want to have big drastic changes come in all at once, like from a verse to a chorus. You could have something get some effects on it, some distortion. You could have the filters open up. You could do that with the master filter. You could have it like here for the verse and open it all the way up for the chorus or whatever. You could do a lot of different things, like have a sudden change. If you want to have a bunch of things happen all at once as a sudden change, that's where changing projects might come in. But if you can do it all with your hands and like at once, then I don't see why you wouldn't do that. And then the other thing you might want to do is have it be more slow, gradual changes. So like slowly opening up the filter through the course of a verse or something like that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this video. Really just sort of more of a bunch of tips on how you can expand a loop into a full song, rather than really one whole cohesive process. I think everyone's going to do it differently, and hopefully you can take something out of this video, maybe use a certain part of my process. If you do something just completely differently, make sure to leave it in the comments, and maybe I can learn from it, or other people can learn from that, and find a workflow that works best for them. Yeah, I think that's about going to wrap up this video. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like. If you have any comments, feedback, suggestions, etc., leave them in the comment section. If you want to see more of this kind of content, and recently it's been a lot of jams, but I'm gonna start making more of this kind of tutorial, tips and tricks kind of content in the future. So if you want to see more of that kind of stuff, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Other than that, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Before I finish the video, I'll just do a little performance to end off the video. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.